Questions for this crew? Any of us?
Frank, can you tell us how's the restaurant doing and how tough was it for you? If you could step up to the mic, if you wouldn't mind, sir. How close were you to having to close, and how is this money going to help you?
It's going to help me very much because of another couple of months, it's all I can stand for it. And then I will, but this is, it's going to be a big help, big help. After 35 years, you know, you see everything you're going away, you know. I use all the means that whatever I had, and this came just in time.
Has it been a sad time for you and your
Yes,
family?
yes, yes.
Because you miss the people, right?
Of course, it's my life. I'm here 7 days a week. I work every day just to expect the people, you know, to greet people, but there is no way we're greeting anybody.
What's your specialty?
My specialty, seafood, veal,
Okay. Thank you.
pasta.
I love it. Thank you very much.
I hope you come and see me someday.
All right.
Love to have you.
I'm at the table by the fireplace.
Okay, you got it. You got it. You got it.
Governor, are you able to, Frank was saying he has maybe a couple more months left in him. With the vaccine on schedule, I know there's so many moving parts, but if you had to give people a timeline, when will we see that 25% capacity start to go back up and be back to a point where...
Well, we're obviously paying a lot of attention to the public health data on this stuff, and especially the hospital census data. And obviously we had a huge surge both in cases and hospitalizations after Thanksgiving, which made us all very nervous about the Christmas and New Year's week. I will say that we're now 14 days past New Year's, and for the past 10 days or so, we've actually seen a leveling out and even a very modest decline, but a decline in our hospitalization rates. Now, before we get too excited about that, we need to remember that we also saw a continuing increase in the growth in our daily case counts over that same period of time. And usually those two things translate into, one translates into the other. It's usually later. But obviously the biggest issue for us is making sure that our healthcare system has the ability to not just serve people who are dealing with COVID, but also people who are dealing with other life-threatening conditions. And that, for us, is the primary factor that we pay attention to with respect to how we think about some of these other issues. But obviously, I'll tell you this, the difficulties associated with what many small businesses, and especially those in the hospitality and entertainment business, have gone through because of the pandemic and all that came with it, is profound. And that's one of the reasons why we in the legislature work so hard to scrape together enough funding to create what is, for all intents and purposes, the largest program of its kind to support small business in the country. And that's not on a per capita basis, that's just on raw dollar basis. So if you add up the first 50 plus the 668, you're talking more than $700 million in funding for small businesses. And it's not loans, this is grants, stuff they can use to pay for rent, for utilities, for mortgages, for staff, for stuff they can't use. And for many of these businesses, we do believe it will be a big part of what helps them get through the difficult times we're in now and past this curve and into the world that we hope will come when we finally get the vaccine fully distributed.
But this summer will look a lot different than last summer with the vaccine on the ground?
I think this summer should look a lot different than last summer, although, and I should probably let other people answer this question, I thought the North End in particular, with all the outdoor seating, I thought that was, we all thought that was pretty great. And we created a shared streets program with state money that never existed before, specifically because some of the first movers who created some of those open seating arrangements in communities around the Commonwealth really sort of fed everybody's imagination about how people could think differently about warmer weather and entertaining generally. And I hope that one of the things that one of the good things that comes out of all this is is a lot more collaboration and creativity between us, local governments, and our colleagues in the legislature and those businesses that operate on those streets to think about how we continue to use outdoor spaces going forward. I mean, this street, a lot of other streets in this area, streets in the South End, streets up on the North Shore, it was festival-like in the summer. And to the extent that we could figure out a way to make that a permanent part of how we think about the 20 minutes of warm weather we get around here, I think that'd be great.
Governor, have you made a decision about sending troops to D.C.? I know you're wrestling with whether we're going to have an issue here and whether you can spare the troops with the National Guard.
So we've been in pretty regular conversation with the feds for the past several days, and we'll have more to say about this specifically later today, but we will be sending Guard personnel to Washington, D.C. as part of the force that they're putting together for the inaugural activities.
It's a few hundred, as you had said.
We'll have more to say about it.
Should I wait for the...
Yeah, but look, this has been a lot of back and forth over the past 48 hours between the Guard here, the Guard in D.C., and some of our colleagues in local and state law enforcement here. And we're just sort of putting the finishing touches on what we're planning to do, and it'll be out to you guys. That has 40 members that normally meets in person, face-to-face, and handles debate and discussion that way, to do that, and just based on the timing, I only have one choice on this. I either got to sign it or veto it. And one of the things the legislature also did, which we're enormously grateful for, is the economic development bill includes 3 years worth of work on getting a housing production and exclusionary zoning bill done, which will make it possible for us to build a lot more housing, a lot more quickly, in a lot more neighborhoods that's much more affordable. And one of my big concerns is I've gotten a lot of incoming from a lot of folks who are in the building and home construction business who've said that certain pieces of this bill, which remember I can't amend and send back, literally may just stop in its tracks any housing development in the Commonwealth. And those words get my attention because while we support many elements of that bill and have worked collaboratively with the folks in the legislature on numerous climate initiatives, which is part of the reason why we're a national leader on this stuff, we've got to build more housing that's less expensive, not less housing that's more expensive. And that issue in particular really rings true for me, especially as we come out of this terrible period we've been in.
Speaker Marinano said he's going to refile the conference report
Yep.
For climate. Do you hope that they make changes in between now and then? Is there something that would make it more palatable for you?
Well, first of all, we need to make our decision, right? And what that says to me is that the House and the Senate would like to get, quote, a significant bill done on this issue. So would we. So from my point of view, that's a positive.
Dana-Farber told one of our colleagues that cancer screenings are down, and you were just talking about that. So how are we going to try to handle that and get people back into these screenings?
You know, one of the reasons why we treated all the outpatient stuff differently this time than we treated it in the spring. In other words, in the spring, we kind of, for a while there, shut down almost everything except just COVID-related activities and emergency procedures. One of the reasons we didn't do that, based on our conversations and dialogue with our colleagues in the healthcare world, was because we wanted people to continue to get a lot of that outpatient preventive service that is so important to both identifying and dealing early with issues around all sorts of illnesses, including cancer. And I think you'll probably see us say a lot more about this with our colleagues in the healthcare community next week. Last spring, I do think part of our messaging, usually with folks from the healthcare world, was don't stop doing that activity. And we did not specifically make changes in the way a lot of the ambulatory and outpatient stuff works as part of the sort of regulatory apparatus we put in place to get through this particular second surge, because we wanted people to continue to get screenings and to pursue those necessary procedures. That stuff is all still wide open, didn't change it, left it as it was.
Do you think the city of Boston should skip the special election from
I tend to try and stay in my own lane on this stuff, Mike. And we have never not signed. The only home rule petitions we've ever sent back have been ones where there was a technical problem that would make it hard or impossible in some cases to implement. And that usually, we hear from the community about that about the time we get the bill, or we raise it with them and send it back if there are issues. But as a general rule, 2 former select board members, we sign home rule petitions.
Last question.
Governor, people with disabilities are applauding you for a section of this bill, the police training bill, that's going to help officers, new officers, understand how to deal with people who have autism or on the spectrum. Is this something that was important to you, and did you think about this particular section at all?
One of the biggest and most valuable elements of the entire police reform bill, in my view, is the laser-like focus that everybody, whatever side they were on when we got into this debate, brought to the question of training and brought to the question of, you know, de-escalation, and how do you handle and deal with difficult circumstances involving different kinds of communities and individuals. And I think credit where credit is due to several folks in the law enforcement community. I mean, one of the things, and I said this as well a while back, that one of the things that Colonel Mason said when he interviewed to be the colonel of the state police was that their training regimen needed to step back on a lot of the sort of more militaristic aspects of it and get much more into the community engagement, de-escalation, and conversation, communication, understanding, empathy element of being in law enforcement. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to work with our colleagues in the community, our colleagues in the law enforcement community as well, to make sure that they get trained, not just trained up as they become officers, but trained as they continue in their careers around issues associated with dealing with populations that have a whole variety of, I mean, deaf and hard of hearing, okay? Another community, no one wears that on their sleeve, right? So you don't necessarily know if you're a police officer, if somebody's dealing with an issue like that. What are some of the ways folks in law enforcement can incorporate recognizing and understanding issues like that into the way they engage with people in the community? I think there are real positives there, and certainly from my point of view, that was one of the things. I mean, if you talk to Tom Turco about this, who's the Secretary of Public Safety, part of why he got into that conversation with the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus in the first place was because he felt we needed to do more with training, and that a big part of creating a post program, some sort of a certification program, would be about focusing on recognizing, spending money, and building a really robust training curriculum so that officers on the ground are much better prepared to work with and communicate with all kinds of people from all walks of life who are dealing with all kinds of issues. And I think that's a really good thing.
Governor, I just wanted to ask, as the top Republican in Massachusetts, now that Trump has been impeached, Republicans are out of power in Washington, where do you see the party moving forward from here, and how do you think it should be moving forward?
Well, I mean, I'd say a couple things about this. One is I have always believed that there is far more common ground than many people in public life recognize or appreciate. And that may just be because my dad is a Republican and my mom was a Democrat. But part of the way you create legislation, part of the way you build community is by recognizing and understanding that there's more than one way to think about an issue and more than one way to deal with it. And I think it's critically important for Republicans and for anybody in public life to get back to the fundamental fact that the people who built our democracy in the first place wanted it to be a debate and a discussion, and wanted it to be something where you couldn't necessarily get a lot done unless you were willing to compromise and work with others. And I think for Republicans, whether at the local level or the state level or the federal level or whatever part of the country you're in, my advice would be the same, which is we have a point of view about the importance of economic development, about the importance of community building, about the importance of being fiscally responsible and disciplined. But fundamentally, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or whatever you might be, this is a team sport. And if you can't come at it as a team sport, you're going to have a very hard time being successful. And I think a lot of folks in my party and in politics generally need to stop thinking about this game as a game about who you're against and who you hate and who you're going to focus your venom on, and start thinking about it as a game that recognizes and understands that to truly be successful, this needs to be about addition and collaboration. I mean, we don't always agree with the folks that we're here with today. But we do agree on many occasions. And I totally respect that, believe in it, and understand it. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, everybody.
Governor, do you want to be a national leader and be an ambassador for the kind of politics you just described to the Republican Party as they rebuild?
I have always said that this was the job I wanted, and if there's some way for me to participate in broader conversations and to use the platform that this job creates for me to do that, I will do that. But I want to make really clear that I am not interested in, and never would I use this job to get some other job. Not interested. That's one of the other things that's always bummed me out about. If you run for a position, you should serve in that position, you should dedicate yourself to that position, and not spend your time thinking about how you can use that position to get to another one. So my answer to your question is, yeah, if I can be helpful in a larger conversation about what I think of as the right way to play this so-called game, I'm happy to do that. But I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that I would ever use this position to leverage something else.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody. And thank you, Frank.
Right.